One thing I've learned about this industry is that fraud fighters love to help. It doesn't matter if you're at a competing financial institution. If you need something, 9 times out of 10, we're going to help you. As long as you can reach us, we're going to help you.
You're listening to Behind Enemy Lines. In each episode, we'll explore advanced fraud fighting strategies with experts battling financial crime every day. Discover what it takes to stay one step ahead of the most sophisticated fraudsters. Ready to sharpen your defenses? Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind Enemy Lines. I'm Mike LaFleur and this episode is brought to you by ThreatMark, your ally in the war against fraud. Today our guest is Hailey Windham, fraud fighter and host of the Banking on Fraudology podcast. She wears many other hats and I'll let her describe them. But Hailey, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Mike, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun conversation. We've talked a little bit and I think our personalities sort of jive together well. So I think this will be a fun conversation. So if you have listened to this podcast before, I always try to get everybody's origin story. You know, whether or not it's your superhero origin story, or the point is, like, how did you get from where you were to where you are now? And if you wouldn't mind telling our listeners a little bit about that journey, that'd be terrific.
Absolutely. So I started at a small local hometown bank. We had 5 branches. It was $200 million in assets. I started as a teller. I actually went in and applied for a mortgage and left with a job application. It was a great story. I kind of harassed that woman for the next 6 weeks until I got the job. And it was great, though. Started as a teller, then had the opportunity to do a report for the accounting department. And the bookkeeping manager was very impressed with me. And so she offered me the job. I have been taught my entire life, you don't kick a gift horse in the mouth. You take every opportunity that's kind of thrown your way. And so I started my journey in bookkeeping. That was a general ledger reconciliation. It was ATM balancing, teller balancing, all the fun stuff that you kind of don't really know goes on behind the scenes. But I was able to really get a holistic understanding of how payments flow through the financial institution. I'll tell you, though, after about 3 to 6 months, I was getting rather bored. My day was over by about 10:30. Solved the puzzle. Okay, now we're in balance. Now what do I do? And I'm just kind of twiddling my thumbs, waiting on the phone to ring. But that opened up a great opportunity for me because it was great. They didn't like doing Reg disputes, so the debit card disputes. And they were like, well, Hailey, we don't want to do it. We want you to do it. Well, great for me. I ended up loving it. It was a way to understand, at first it was, what's all this going on with all this fraud? And then it was, oh, I know they are not telling the truth. They are telling some lies. We're going to catch some people in some lies. But then it was, well, why are we even taking these losses to begin with? How can we get in front of it? How do we even protect those people? It's really hard with an education campaign to try to get people to understand truly how fraud works, how to protect your card. And so for me, it was, how do we prevent it in the back office? How do we make it from where it doesn't happen at all? Yeah, you may need to come get a new debit card, but the loss is not going to happen on your account. We're not going to have to do an investigation because we're going to prevent that fraud from happening anyways. So that was a great experience for me because I was also tasked with my CFO to find out, if we don't have chargeback rights, why are we even allowing these to go through? How can we really mitigate that loss? And then an opportunity came for me to work for a much larger organization and do just fraud. So that was with a credit union that was, at the time, it was $1.2 billion in assets, 19 branches. So it was a much larger footprint. And I was really excited because they had the bones for a good fraud prevention framework program, but they didn't have it really enacted. So I was able to go in and really dive into the, how do we work? How does this work with our culture? How can we really shift the culture to being one that is from the top down? We don't want to have fraud, but if we do have fraud, we're going to make sure that we mitigate it from ever happening again. And so that was a really interesting journey to be able to do that. Then another opportunity came where it was, Hailey, you're doing a great job at this one credit union, but how about helping a lot of credit unions at once? Being able to come into a consulting role it was a learning experience for me, I'll have to admit, because I was used to having one organization, one policy to follow, but then whenever I'm helping multiple organizations at a time, it was a big juggling act. But it was one that I really accepted that challenge and kind of dove in, and I absolutely loved it. Also at that time had the opportunity to start my own podcast, which is called Banking on Fraudology. It's a sister podcast for the Fraudology podcast, which is hosted by Carice Hendrick. And at the same time, I'm also doing a little bit of advocacy work with Operation Shamrock, which is an organization, a nonprofit organization dedicated to furthering the education and awareness of what's going on with pig butchering scams and really, mobilizing and disrupting this current cycle for law enforcement and financial institutions so that we can actively prevent these scams from ever happening. So it's been a great journey and one that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. There's a couple things that I want to pull the thread on just a little bit. So there seemed to be this pivot point or this point in your career where you went so that transition from teller to bookkeeping to now you're going to start investigating fraud. And you could have stopped at that. You could have just said, I'm just going to investigate fraud, or I'm just going to do the paybacks or whatever it is. But there seems to be something that happened that you questioned and you said, hey, why is this fraud even happening? Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And at first it almost was like a task from my CFO at the time. He was like, why are we taking these losses? And I was like, well, we don't have chargeback rights. And he said, well, then why are we allowing them to go through? And I was like, well, I don't know. And he said, well, find out. And so I did that, and I was learning, and I was really excited for the fact that we could prevent so much. But then whenever I shifted into the role at the credit union, there was a different mindset from the leadership. It was, we don't care if we take a loss as long as our valid member transactions are occurring. We don't want to impact any valid member stuff going on because it's okay to take a loss as long as we put that member first. And so that was a struggle for me to have to learn that too. But as a way that it was almost like that puzzle piece, what can I do? How can I filter that rule just enough that it's not going to impact valid member transactions, but it's going to stop the fraud? And so that's trying to understand, okay, we got merchant category codes, we've got amounts, we've got regions, we've got different, acquirer IDs we can look at, we've got the terminal IDs. And so being able to know that, like, hey, I can get nitty gritty in this data and make a valid rule that's not going to impact members and it's also going to save money. It was a win-win, and it was one that I was super excited to learn how to do because, again, it goes back to the people. That mind shift of, okay, if we take a loss, whatever, but how do we prevent the people from taking a loss? And that was a really great challenge and one that I really looked forward to learning more. And it was also that I've had a fraud fighter that I love dearly still to this day. She's one that I don't get to work with anymore, but she was one that was super passionate about, why are we taking this loss? And no, I know something's fishy with this and what is going on? And, having to argue back through the chargeback process. And she would tell me whenever we first met, she was like, you're going to think I'm crazy, but this is true. This is what we need to do. And I was like, no, you're not crazy at all. You need to feel empowered. Keep going because we've got a job to do and you're going to help me succeed in creating this great culture and program. And it did wonders for her and I's relationship too, in that she saw a pattern. She was like, Hailey, this is the kind of fraud rule I think we need to run. I'd look at it. We'd do an analysis to determine how much of an impact. We'd have to go back to the drawing board. But it was creating a partnership within that organization that needed to happen in order to have the strong foundation of a fraud team so that whenever another business unit reaches out, we're able to work together collectively to have that. So I hope I answered that question, but I kind of feel like maybe I went in a circle.
No, you didn't go in a circle, but you did say what I was kind of thinking that you would say. There was a certain point in that you said it's about the people and it's about protecting the people. And I think a lot of fraud fighters get their passion from protecting people. And I was thinking that leads to your transition to this consultative role where you're helping other credit unions or other financial institutions implement their fraud protection program. It's that passion for protecting the people. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. It is so accurate because we go in and we talk to the fraud people and they're like, they just won't listen, and we want to do this, and we know that there's a way to prevent it, but they're not listening at the top. And so being able to bring in the practitioner mindset, but also those that can have those conversations with executives, we're helping to prove the point that it is about the people. So that's absolutely one of the reasons why I shifted into this role, because I was able to help one organization, but I knew that there were others that were struggling the same way I was.
Yeah, yeah. So I know a little bit about your background. There's something we didn't bring it up yet, and I'll let you explain it, but it has something to do with being a superstar. Can you explain that a little bit?
Definitely not a superstar, but I was awarded the CUNA, which is the Credit Union National Association. They're now NAFQ, but I was awarded the Credit Union Rockstar Award in 2023. And that was for the work I did in order to bring a collaborative effort among credit unions where we really work together to build a really a group, a coalition almost of, hey, the same fraud's happening here that's happening at your organization. If we work together, guess what? We can fight this together. Oftentimes the financial institutions, the credit unions, it's like, oh, we don't want to, share our secret sauce of our interest rates and our plans for special rates that we have coming up. But guess what? None of us want to be number one in fraud. So we all will be willing to share that information because the same thing is going to happen. And we were able to really see that whenever we started having conversations. It was like, wait a minute, they're even using the same aliases with you that they're using with me. So we are able to know, hey, this is not an actual person. This is one that we've flagged for identity theft. So there's no, PII in here. I can tell you that this individual, because we're all 314B compliant as well, I can share this information with this group to say, Hailey Windham is not a real person using this identification number. Like, this is somebody that's actively trying to defraud us. And so together as a community, we were able to fix that. I was also given that award too for the initiatives within my credit union, like creating an internal podcast. We called it the T. So it stood for training, education, and awareness. I'm also Southern, so it also had a double meaning of spilling the tea, the fraud gossip. Everybody loves a fun fraud story. So being able to share those with the entire organization and being able to share my passion with everyone from the tellers to our IT people to the C-suite, it was a great way to really bring a fun collaborative effort. And I say collaborative because I was bringing in other business unit owners to weigh in on how fraud interacts with their departments as well. So it was just a great way to give back. And it was a wonderful surprise being recognized by that association for that work.
Yeah, that's awesome. That bit about forming a coalition, you'll notice in the lead in to the podcast, I talk about, ThreatMark being your ally in the war on fraud. We believe that financial institutions need as much help as they can get. And if it's us helping them or other financial help institutions helping them, or, ThreatMark providing a fraud intelligence network, or the software that we provide, or even the podcast, just a forum that people can talk about these issues, the more that we can work together, the stronger we become against, the bad guys. So I totally respect what you created there. And I know it's our nature to be a little bit humble about when we get recognition, but, I hope you're proud of what you've done because it sounds pretty amazing. But,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's change gears just a little bit. I know you have an initiative going on right now. You call it the 50 State Initiative, or lovingly you call it the 50 Date Initiative. Could you explain what the 50 State Initiative is?
Absolutely. So before I left my credit union and went into the consulting role, I kind of had this list of goals. I called them, I have it on my bulletin board. I started calling it a fraud bucket list. And then I was like, well, a bucket list means that you just hope you get it done, whereas a goal list is something you're actively working towards completing. So I changed it to a goal list. And on that, it said that I wanted to connect with fraud leaders in all 50 states. Well, I started it this year. I was like, I can do two birds, one stone. I can connect with fraud fighters, but at the same time, I now work from home, and selfishly, I needed to have some, human adult interaction. So it wasn't just a consulting role where I'm, having that advisory kind of conversation with a fraud leader. I wanted to have that kind of give and take, like talk to me about what's going on and, maybe we can share some information. Maybe I can connect you to somebody else. But really, it started out as just a selfish way for me to connect back with the industry. I have the podcast and I am speaking actively to practitioners, but sometimes people don't want to be interviewed on a podcast and they just want to have an outlet where they can share what's going on in their fraud world. And so I wanted to start having those conversations. And what better way than to say, hey, I need somebody from all 50 states, because then that's at least 50 people I'm going to talk to, right?
That's an amazing goal. So how did you think of all 50 states? Where did that idea come from instead of just calling a bunch of people?
Well, it was because if I can call a bunch of people, right? But I know all those people. I wanted to talk to new people. I wanted to hear new things that were going on. And, we talk to people all the time, and, we listen to the fraud leaders that get on to the podcasts and the webinars, and they're saying, well, East Coast fraud is different from West Coast fraud. And you're going to see different things in Texas than what you're going to see in Washington State. So I wanted to really understand, well, what are those differences and what can we take back? And also at the same time, the work that we're doing with Operation Shamrock, I'm wanting to know, like, is pig butchering something you're seeing? How are you actively combating that? And then what do you know about the legislation in your state? Are they doing anything to actively combat that? And if not, what can we do together? Like, what do you need from me or from my group that I can take back to really provide something back to the, the industry? And it started out as just a regular conversation that I was having with people, but it's turned into so much more. Now it really is an initiative. Now I really am collecting this data and in a way that I can give it back to the industry as, hey, fraud fighters, here's what I learned that everybody's going through. Hey, C-suite executives, we need you to do a better job. Here's what you're not hearing from us. Hey, legislators, this is what we need as an industry. Hey, government, do better. We've got some issues and some gaps, and we need you to do a better job of, here's all 50 states, we all have the same issues going on. Here's the information, help us out.
Yeah, that makes sense. In your conversations by the way, why don't you tell us how many states you've been in contact right now or with so far?
So right now I am at 40. I'm missing 10 states, but they've been great. I haven't just talked to one person from those. I've talked to multiple from some states, but I keep my little key map here because, most people are really good with geography. I am not. I can tell you where South Carolina and Florida are. And Georgia, but that's in California and Texas, but that's kind of about it. I'm going to need somebody else to tell me the names of the states. So I've got my little key out and I look at it all the time and I'm like, okay, come on, Utah, come on, Idaho, Montana. I need your help. New Mexico, the Dakotas, Arkansas, Indiana, Mississippi, and Hawaii. I need you. Like, please reach out.
That's awesome. So in your talks with these people from these various states, is there anything unexpected or memorable that you've run into?
Absolutely. So I was speaking with an organization in Kentucky that when we started talking about, pig butchering and different things that were going on, they actually told me about a scam that an elderly person had. It was like a Publishers Clearinghouse scam that morphed into an IRS and bank impersonation scam. And it just went on. And the bank was trying to do their best to keep her from withdrawing those funds. But then this woman, this 70-year-old woman, was actually coerced by the scammer to threaten gun violence at the teller window. And that was one that I was just flabbergasted by. And so were they, because then, of course, frontline staff now doesn't feel safe to go into the branch. And our first and foremost, initiative is going to be to make sure that they feel safe and secure in the organization. But then whenever we look at it from the victim side, it's like, oh my gosh, now this woman who's been banking with us forever, we've got a cease and desist that they can't come back into the branch. We're going to have to exit that relationship. And then what happens? They go into a new branch and that branch is not going to know what all she's been going through because she's not going to disclose that, hey, yeah, I just told another bank I was going to, shoot them up if they didn't give me my money. And that it's a horrible situation that fraud fighter, when she was talking to me, she said, I just wish there was more I could do for the victim. We, of course, went into reaction mode, and we made our people feel safe and comfortable. We made it where she could not come back into the branch. But now that that part is over with, now I can only think about the victim and how my heart aches for them, because now where she had somebody that was trying to intervene and trying to stop her from doing these transactions, now she's going to a brand new financial institution who's not going to know what's going on. And it's going to be another surprise for them when that happens.
Wow, that is a pretty shocking story. It just points to how insidious this the scams and social engineering are. You know, the psychological manipulation and the emotional manipulation, that they could take it to that extent. That's an incredible story. Within the institutions, are you seeing, one of the things that you talked about earlier was at the executive level, talking about how you're going to implement these fraud programs or fraud prevention programs within the institution. Are you seeing silos within institutions that need to be broken down?
Oh, absolutely. There's always a miscommunication of what exactly the fraud teams are trying to do. A lot of that comes from the risk and compliance side, where hey, we've got to protect ourselves legally. Hey, there's also regulations that we've got to be in compliance with. But then you've got fraud, who maybe is a sister department of those two, but they're not the same. And so we've got to break those silos that, hey, fraud is a partner to those other business units. So if you're in e-services and it's all about cards and it's all about online banking, fraud is not going to try to stop you from bringing on any new vendor. Fraud is going to say, hey, let me in on those conversations with you so that I can make sure that that vendor is going to be looking out for our members in the fraud sense. Because I'm going to look at it with fraud lens, where you're looking at it as products and payments. Is this payment going to flow? Is this going to connect to our system? Okay, that's all well and good. And how fast can our products work for our consumers? But for the fraud lens, we're going to look and say, okay, what kind of information are they asking for to validate a different transaction? How are they authenticating that the member is the member? What information are they asking for? How can we make sure that there is a tier 2 process for those higher risk transactions? And also, hey, if they say in their contract they're going to do something, great. Let me make sure and hold them accountable, because I'm going to look at it from that fraud lens of, they said they were going to do something, great. I'm going to be kind of like your barking dog in the background going, oh no, you said, because I've seen it so many times where we go through these great sales pitches, right? And we're having these conversations of, oh yeah, they're going to do this and that. And yeah, they do have fraud services, so we don't have to worry about fraud. But let's look at what their fraud services are. Is it just a report? Do the people that they claim to have in their back office, are they actually fraud practitioners who have sat in this role? Or are they just interns that they're bringing in to try to make a function work? So we've got a very important role that I think that oftentimes it's overlooked, because it's the fear of, well, risk and legal is going to try to stop us from implementing something, and they just want to hold us up and put up red tape. And compliance, they're going to argue back because we're not doing this or that. But fraud is not the same thing. Fraud, you've got to take it seriously and let them interact with every department in your organization. If you are a C-suite executive and you have not had a conversation with your fraud person, I don't mean your risk leader who's above your fraud person. I mean the actual fraud person, the one that's in it day to day. You are missing out on a very important conversation that needs to happen. You need to have a true, no holds bar understanding of, this is the fraud, this is what's happening. Because I've seen so many times where that in-between report that goes from fraud to risk to the executives, it gets a little bit of frosting added on top to sweeten it up just a little bit so it doesn't look as bad as it really is. But it's a really bad problem, and one that can be easily fixed if you just allow the fraud person to have a little bit of authority when it comes to implementing rules, implementing detection systems, and how those interact with our other systems internally.
So what I hear you saying is, I hear a theme coming out. One of your goals was to work collaboratively without external from your institution, with other financial institutions, collaboratively to fight fraud. But now I hear you saying that you need to have the same culture within the institution, that you have to work collaboratively to fight fraud and break down those barriers, break down those silos. And that's where you're going to be able to get those wins and protect the members and the customers, is when everybody's working towards the same goal, which, I like to say protecting the member or the customer's treasure, because they've entrusted your institution with that treasure. So if we all work collaboratively, we can protect that treasure.
100%. It starts within your own organization. You can't expect to have a better collaborative effort externally if you don't have it originally in your own organization. Being able to be that partner. Don't come in like a bull in a china shop and saying, oh, no, fraud, we got to stop this, we got to stop that. It's actually understanding how everything works and then working together with that business unit owner to say, hey, how do we come up collectively with a fraud rule, something that you're comfortable with, that I'm comfortable with, and we've looked at all aspects of how this works with the organization, and truly being a partner versus another roadblock for that business unit.
So we're getting close to our time, but before we start to wrap up, I'd like to get some insight into Operation Shamrock. You've mentioned pig butchering a couple times in the North American context, and I'd just like to give you the opportunity to explain what Operation Shamrock is working on.
Thank you so much for that, truly. Operation Shamrock is one of those passion projects that you just can't ignore. I met Erin West, who is our founder of Operation Shamrock. She is a force to be reckoned with. She's amazing. She was a district attorney out in Santa Clara, California. She was a prosecutor for the REACT task force, which was with cyber crimes. And she noticed that there was this big issue with these pig butchering scams. She made a LinkedIn post one day and said, if you're telling your victims that there's nothing you can do, that have lost their money to crypto, you're wrong. And the day I read that was the day I had actually told a member that there was nothing I could do. She might as well have tagged my name in that post because I thought she was talking directly to me. And I reached out to her. We had a conversation. She told me the steps that I needed to take. She connected me with a law enforcement officer that I was able to direct my member to. And I learned that, even though now the fraudsters are working faster to move the funds through crypto so that we can't get it back, there is still more that can be done even outside of recovery. And that's listening to these victims and understanding what exactly went on, because we don't have anybody else in the industry that's doing that to try to understand. So what we are doing is, apart from all the other initiatives, I'll tell you the ones that I'm working in, and that is we are having multiple victim calls a week. So we have 2 victim calls a week. We have them on Fridays. And what we do is we come in, Erin is listening for the law enforcement side of things. I'm listening for the banking side of things. We allow the victim to tell their story. Tell us exactly what happened in your own time frame that you feel comfortable with. Just know that, we are here to support you. You are on a call with friends. We are not here to judge. We're here to listen, and we're here to take in any information you're willing to give us. And what we do is we learn where those gaps were. Where could law enforcement have done a better job? Where could banks have done a better job where either they stopped a transaction or they created pause so that the victim could then learn or research in their own way of, hey, is this an actual transaction that I want to do? Because whenever we're moving millions of dollars in the span of less than 15 days through like 12 wires, something is wrong there. If the financial institution is not raising a red flag and having an actual conversation with their customer, something is wrong. And if your customer is still saying, well, I'm doing this, I know that we have our own systems that we're having to go through, but we need to be comfortable with asking additional questions. If you ask the same question, because I used this example before, when my daughter, does something she's not supposed to do, I can ask her the first time and she's going to tell me what she thinks I'm going to believe. I'm going to ask her the same question again. I might get a little bit better of the version of the truth. I'm going to ask her a third time and I'm going to say, are you sure? And then I'm going to finally get the truth out of her, because we don't necessarily want to tell the whole truth, especially if we think that, well, if I'm not supposed to tell anybody, maybe it's because this is a really good secret sauce, But if my bank keeps asking me because they're concerned, I did go with them because I wanted them to protect my financial security. That is their job. Maybe I can hear them out because it's not that we're just trying to keep your deposits in our accounts for the interest and all that great stuff that they're trying to make us out to sound like. That's what the fraudsters are telling them. But what we actually want to do is just protect you and make sure that you're making the decisions fully educated, making sure that you have all the information that you need in order to trust the process for the transaction that you're doing. But we're not doing that right now. So we're taking those conversations and we are actively educating law enforcement and banking with everything that we're learning. This is the only organization that has up-to-date training, and we're talking monthly. So all of those calls that we're having, I'm taking down all the information. I'm learning where the financial institution had a gap, and I'm giving that information back to the industry. I'm also reaching out individually to those organizations to say, hey, can we have a talk about this? It's completely off the record, but it's a way to say, this is what your customer believes happened. Can you tell me what systems you may have had in place so that we can truly understand, is it something that maybe the financial institution did do all that they could to try to educate, to try to disrupt, to try to interject in some way to prevent the transaction. But all in all, it is the customer's money and you have to release it to them. So did they do all those steps? And if so, then that's a way of opening that bridge back up to that customer to say, hey, this is what we've learned, and making sure that they feel heard, they feel validated, and also that the financial institution has an opportunity to learn from those gaps that the customer believes that there were in place. And it really is just the better understanding to holistically understand how this scam works, which is operating at an industrial level. The millions and billions of dollars are leaving this economy, and we don't even know the true numbers. And that's what's scary.
Yeah, it is scary, especially for a small institution that maybe has 2 or 3 fraud analysts and they're up against organized crime and state actors. Sometimes it is truly can feel overwhelming. Is there an opportunity for fraud fighters to get involved in Operation Shamrock? You mentioned training, but is there other ways that they can get involved?
Absolutely. So if you go to operationshamrock.org, you can sign up to be a volunteer. It's where you're signing up for the conversations, but also if you have something that you can give back to us, what do you think you could offer to? Because again, we are a nonprofit right now, so everything is volunteer that we're doing. But is there something are you great at writing policy? Are you great at writing grant letters? We need the assistance so that we can also industrialize our approach from Operation Shamrock. So anyone that's willing to help, we are grateful, and we are looking forward to having a conversation with you. So please just sign up at operationshamrock.org. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can have a conversation.
Awesome. Before we're going to start the lead out, before we do that, is there any advice or any lessons learned that you want to leave with the audience before we start to wrap it up?
Advice for fraud fighters in your organizations: you're not alone. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to others in the industry. One thing I've learned about this industry is that fraud fighters love to help. It doesn't matter if you're at a competing financial institution. If you need something, 9 times out of 10, we're going to help you. As long as you can reach us, we're going to help you. I have noticed at some of the larger organizations, it's hard to find the contact information, but LinkedIn is a very powerful tool. I've used it to connect with multiple people. And so use it, reach out to people, connect with people, and you're not alone. There are people that are willing to help you, to mentor you, to be able to have those conversations with your executives. Also, make friends in your organization. If you right now feel like you are in this dark corner by yourself as a fraud fighter, reach out to the business unit owners and ask, how can I help you with fraud? And how can we work together? You'd be very surprised at how well that works and how you can very easily build bridges that will one day really help you succeed in your fraud program.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So you've already mentioned people can reach out to you on LinkedIn. You've given the URL for Operation Shamrock. They can get in touch with the people that you work with there. I think that you have a link for the 50 state initiative as well. You're welcome to mention that now, but we're also going to put these things in the show notes so people don't have to jot it down as they're listening. But if you want to give that URL, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, I'll just provide that for the show notes because it's one of those weird links.
Okay, great.
It's just going to take you to a Google form. But I will also say, if your organization is struggling and you need some assistance in any kind of, fraud, just understanding of a program, just reach out to me. I'm very happy to have a conversation.
Terrific. Hailey, thanks. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I find the stuff that you're working on really inspiring, and hopefully the conversation will spark some inspiration into the listeners as well. And for the listeners, don't forget that Hailey is a host of Banking on Fraudology podcast. And don't forget the initiatives that she's working on at Operation Shamrock as well. And if you want to be the representative of your state in the 50-state initiative, just look for that link that's going to be in the show notes, and maybe you'll do your state proud. Thanks for tuning in to Behind Enemy Lines.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Behind Enemy Lines. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts so you never miss a conversation on fighting fraud. We'll see you on the next one.